KPI Trees is a great simple framework that is focused on linking your strategy with the development efforts from your teams and measure the results of those developments with different KPIs to make sure that you are succeeding in your efforts. So how KPI trees work is relatively simple. When you start with a KPI tree, the first thing that you have to define is the highest level or the lowest level, depends on how you are structuring your tree. Basically, what is your vision? What is your high-level goal with your product, your service, what you are trying to achieve? What value are you bringing to your customers? What problem are you solving for them? Basically, this is what many people know as the North Star of their company. And yes, there can be attached some financial results to this one, but it should start always from solving a problem that your customers have. The next level that you have to define in the branches are the strategic goals. So here you want to define what are your strategies. Your strategies are defining basically where and how do you succeed? How do you make sure that you build successful products, but successful businesses basically? What a strategy also looks like is the steps that are going to help you achieve your vision. This is why a vision is important. If your strategy is not linked to your vision, it might look like a success, might be a short-term success, but maybe not a long-term success. So you have to make sure that those strategic goals are aiming to get you closer to that vision. When you are defining a KPI tree, one of my recommendations would be that stick to as little strategic goals as possible. If you have too many strategic goals, especially for one product, that means that you are diluting your efforts over too many different areas that you want to cover. Unless you have a really big team, probably then you are diluting yourself too much and then you are building very little impact. And when you're building little impact, what it means in practice is that you probably are going to also build quite little business impact because your customers are not going to notice. There's not going to be enough value built into the product. There's not going to be enough promotion to hear about this value, and so on. So focus is always better. It's always going to help you to win or to get there faster. In the next branches of the KPI tree, what we're going to talk about are the execution part. So here's where basically the rubber meets the road. This is where I think many teams fall. And I'll come back with a story about that in a moment. You have to start linking your strategic goals to your development. Here is very important that you are looking at what are the development activities that you have, what are the different efforts, the different projects, the different tasks, features, opportunities, whatever you want to call them, that your teams are working on. Which ones of these strategic levels or strategic branches are they linked? I would even add, there's no strategy kind of a branch, because that will let you see or help you see that there are some activities that are not linked to any activity whatsoever. And that's a very big problem for a company. And yes, there are going to be things like maintenance that you have to keep on doing because there's bugs and there's activities that you have to do just to make sure that the product stays working or maybe it's optimizing over time so it doesn't it's not falling behind in performance and different metrics like that. But most of your development should be linked to some of those strategic goals that you have. And here's how you can then visualize it. Which ones are the strategic goals? Which ones are the features that are linked to different strategic goals? And you can see and understand better what your effort is, where you are putting basically your bets. Because you can see that if one of my strategic goals has a ton of development, well, that means that I'm putting much more effort in that one than maybe in the next one that I'm not putting that much development. And why this is important is that if you are able to link the developments that you are doing with your strategic goals, that means that your efforts are going in the right direction. Your efforts, whether they are successful or not, hopefully they are, because there's no way to ensure success when it comes to development or when it comes to business. But if they're linked to those strategies and if they're linked around an area of focus, it's going to help or increase those chances of success much more. And here in this stage, I think is where most of the companies fail and where there's the brilliance of KPI trees, because it gives you a visual representation of how these two worlds are linked. And this is not something that you see with regular roadmaps. This is why I think that KPI trees are really good to visualize and understand better how your efforts, how your work is actually bringing value or focusing on bringing those strategies forward. And this is a critical point because in my experience, this is the step that most of the companies have defined some kind of a strategy, might be more explicit or not, but the link to the roadmap, the link to the plans, the development that different teams are doing is many times not there. It's not really established, which means that there's that disconnection. And then the person that is making the decisions of how to plan this roadmap is not talking to the person that is making the decision or that it has been prioritizing a certain strategy. When there's that link is broken, that means that the work that this team is doing is not going to be linked to the strategy. And that I've seen time and time again. And that's, I think, why KPI Trees is brilliant to really link that strategic, those strategic intents with the actual execution of the roadmaps. And then finally, there's the 4 level of branches. And I think that this is where it gets also very interesting, is that you don't want to just link to the strategic goals. You also want to be able to measure the results and be able to have a few KPIs that can be affected by the different opportunities, the different features that you're building. And you have those KPIs now reflected in the KPI tree. So basically you are tying now your development to a strategy that is getting you closer to a goal, and you are measuring those results or planning to measure those results of the successful adoption of certain feature, set opportunity, and see if it's meeting your expectations. Then potentially work on iterating and optimizing to make sure that you are reaching those expectations, those KPIs, or if you are completely far off, what went wrong? What can we do to really make this work? Or was this completely the wrong approach? Which I'm pretty sure it will happen at some point. So the beauty of this is that it's linking high-level strategy to the actual execution of the plans in the teams, to making those data-driven decisions on whether those the adoptions or the success of the developments and the strategic goals is really there or not, or what can you do, and help you make the decisions of what to do next. So now let's go through the pros of KPI trees. The first one that comes to my mind is that they are a very easy way to visually understand how your efforts link to your strategic goals, or they don't. Because if this is the first time that you are doing this and you have never really looked into how your strategy links to your roadmap, maybe they don't link at all, and then you have another type of problem. So this is great, and then on top of that, they help you measure the success with the KPIs that you have defined to make sure that you are achieving your strategic goals, to make sure that you are achieving your vision. And why is also this beautiful? I didn't mention that earlier. Many people confuse strategy intents or strategic intents with goals. So increasing your monthly active users by 20% is not a strategy, it's a goal. So it could be linked to a KPI. Your strategic goal might be something else related to growing your customers in a certain industry and country over the next period of time, or whatever exactly is your strategy. But a goal is not a strategy, and this is why people sometimes confuse those two things. Anyways, I was getting a bit sidetracked there. Let's go back to the pros. The next one is that it helps your teams to keep the focus on what matters. So your team will have many times problems making sure that what they are building, it's actually something that is relevant for the business. Because usually strategy is not present. It's not something that they talk about all the time. Having something like a KPI tree gives you a visual representation that, okay, yes, this actually is linked to search strategy, so I can see how it's advancing that. And finally, I think that there's a beauty on having the KPIs integrated here, because it kind of tries to bridge the gap from the vision and the strategy to the execution, to that linkage to the execution, and making sure that we are building those implementations or those opportunities and features into our products or services that really are going to drive the success, or according to our criteria of what success look like by the KPIs that we have defined. So what are the cons of KPI trees? And as you can imagine, there's no perfect framework. So there are also some downsides of using KPI trees. So the first one is that simple doesn't mean easy to implement. As much as it sounds like it can be nice and easy to implement, just having a simple method that is easy to understand, that doesn't mean that it's easy to implement and it's easy to maintain. Because if it was so easy, everybody would be doing it, everybody would be doing successful products. And well, you're seeing how it is. I've seen one company implementing KPI trees, so it's not that common maybe as people might think. And I think that maybe one of the problems that I see also with this KPI trees framework is that it's like a snapshot, usually. Not something that you dynamically do, that you all the time have it visually. There might be a tool that supports it. I don't think I've seen it. When I use several of those product management tools, project management tools, and I don't think that any of them have anything like KPI trees that you can visually see what is the status of your development and how it links to your strategic goals. At least not in an easy way. Maybe you can do something with reports, but definitely not with this visual aspect that KPI trees have. The next con that I see is that it's not a holistic framework. This is probably one of my problems, is that it doesn't talk about all the process. It doesn't talk about how to do the implementation and how to make sure that people are actually working on this. So that's why I think that that's probably a downside. So it doesn't define the operations, which is sometimes relatively normal with these frameworks. They just try to stay very high level. That's why they stay popular. If they are very detailed, usually they are not that popular. Another con that I see is that I think that from my point of view, it misses in alignment between teams. It's usually used by one team with their own strategic goals, but it doesn't look at a holistic approach of how does this work when we want to define cross-functional work. And this may be a video that I should talk about, because when we talk about cross-functional work, I think that we are missing the point. I don't think that we are talking about what matters. And I think that that's cross-functional, as beautiful as it is. Usually we just talk about cross-functional as in go work together, and not as giving the framework of on where you should be working and how. Anyways, if you're interested in that topic, let me know in the comments below. I could do a video about it. And another con that I've seen with KPI trees is that they are done kind of ad hoc and very quickly put together, which I think that potentially this might lead to waste, because maybe strategy is not properly defined or not properly aligned, or people are not that familiar with it and they just throw there what they think is important as their strategic goals. It might be that the KPIs are decided on the fly, which I've seen sometimes, and I think that that's also a problem, that there's not a ton of thought put behind. And then it's just done in one session, couple of hours, done, here we go. I think, and I'm not saying that you have to always spend a ton of time, but sometimes when you just do this kind of a little bit of back of the napkin type of work, it usually doesn't result in very successful implementations or outcomes. So what are the best use cases that I see for KPI trees? I think that the small teams can benefit from this a ton, especially when everybody knows what the others are doing, especially even across different disciplines. So marketing, knowing what product does and working very close together, the same with sales, and having a very clear focus. So I think that in those ones, it can be really good. I think that products in early stages, I think that it's also very good for those ones because they're in earlier implementation. So it can give you very clear understanding of, okay, this is my product, this is what I wanted to do, and this is how I'm going to be, this is what success look like with these strategies. This is what the my roadmap, how is it linking to the strategy, and how I'm going to be measuring this. So I think that for those ones like startups, I think that for those can be very successful. Agile environments, I think that can be also very good because it's very dynamic in the way that you can use it. So I think that for those ones can be really good. I said earlier that KPI Trees doesn't have a holistic approach as a framework. If you want a framework that is going to really help you implement the strategic alignment between execution and your strategic goals across the organization with detailed information on how to create those operations, those systems to successfully adopt the framework, go check the link in the description where I have my course there that might be interesting for you. So KPI Trees, I think, is a great tool for either when you are planning or when you want to do an assessment of what is the current situation of your alignment between your strategic goals and your execution, or if you are planning those ones to see how you're going to be able to link the developments and how you're going to measure success. So if you have not done this kind of work of understanding strategic alignment, this is a very kind of easy way to start dipping your toes into that kind of world. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, comment if you like this kind of topic, and what kind of frameworks, strategic frameworks, would you like me to cover in the future. See you in the next one.